Let's talk about a moment in history when an entire nation was captivated by a single word, freedom. But what happens when that one word means something totally different to every single person who hears it? Well, that's the story of one nation, many dreams.
Just look at this image. It's incredible, right? A sea of people, all seemingly moving as one. But what you're seeing hides a much more complicated reality. When every person in that crowd has a different struggle, a different hope, a different dream of what freedom actually looks like, how on earth do you bring them all together? That's the puzzle we're going to try and solve today.
So to really get what's going on, we have to rewind a bit. Because post-World War I, India wasn't just in turmoil, it was a powder keg. I mean, it was pushed to the absolute brink, just waiting for a spark.
See, people were hoping that after the war, things would get better. But they got the exact opposite. The British brought in huge new taxes, even a brand new income tax. Prices for everyday things literally doubled. On top of that, villages were being forced to send their young men to the army, crops were failing everywhere, and a deadly flu epidemic was sweeping through the country. It was just one thing after another.
And the human cost of all this? It's just staggering. According to the 1921 census, as many as 13 million people died from the famines and the epidemic. So any hope that the war ending would bring relief was completely crushed. Instead, people were facing this whole new level of suffering. And it's right here, in this moment of desperation, that our story really gets going.
Because into this complete mess steps a new leader, Mahatma Gandhi. And he comes with a totally radical idea, a new kind of weapon for a new kind of struggle. He called it Satyagraha. Now, this wasn't about violence or fighting in the traditional sense. The whole idea was that truth itself has a force, a power. He believed that if your cause was truly just, you didn't need guns or swords. You could win by appealing to the conscience of your enemy, to make them see the truth of the injustice they were causing.
And you can feel the power of this idea in Gandhi's own words. He called it pure soul force. This wasn't about being weak or passive. No way. This was an incredibly active form of resistance, a spiritual and a political weapon all in one. It was a call to unite everyone under what he called the Dharma of nonviolence. Just think about how revolutionary that was at the time.
And look, this wasn't just some nice idea on paper. Gandhi had already been putting it to the test, and it was working. In 1917, he was in Champaran with peasants fighting an oppressive system. Same year, he was in Kedah, backing farmers who couldn't pay their taxes. A year later, he was organizing cotton mill workers in Ahmedabad. He was proving, little by little, that this radical idea could get real, tangible results.
So, these local successes laid the groundwork for something much bigger, a nationwide non-cooperation movement. The rallying cry was a single word, Swaraj, which means self-rule. But here's where things get really interesting, because that one word meant completely different things to different people.
The movement first caught fire in the cities. For the educated middle class, the students, the teachers, the lawyers, Swaraj was about rejecting the entire British system. They walked out of government-run schools, they quit their jobs at government colleges, and lawyers gave up their practices in British courts. It was a mass boycott of the whole colonial machine. And the protest had a serious economic side, too. These bonfires of foreign cloth became a powerful symbol. But it was more than symbolic. It hit the British where it hurts, their wallets. In just 1 year, the import of foreign textiles was cut in half. That shows you the real power people felt they had.
Okay, but now let's leave the cities for a minute, because if you went out into the countryside, the idea of Swaraj completely transformed. For peasants in places like Awadh, freedom wasn't about boycotting schools. It was about ending the insane rents and the forced unpaid labor, called begar, that landlords demanded from them.
And this is a really crucial point. You start to see a disconnect. The Congress leadership was trying to guide everything into one unified, nonviolent struggle. But on the ground, the peasants had their own interpretation. They started attacking the homes of landlords, looting markets, and some even started saying that Gandhi himself had declared that no one had to pay taxes anymore.
And if you venture even deeper, into the hills, the meaning of Swaraj shifts yet again. For tribal communities, like those in the Gudum Hills, the British were a direct threat to their entire way of life. New colonial forest laws stopped them from grazing their cattle or gathering food. So for them, Swaraj was a militant guerrilla fight to take back their forests.
This struggle produced these incredible figures, like Alluri Sitaram Raju. I mean, this guy is fascinating. He was a huge admirer of Gandhi, told people to wear Indian-made cloth, but at the same time, he was absolutely convinced that India could only be freed through violence. He led guerrilla attacks against police stations, and even after he was captured and executed, he became this legendary folk hero. He perfectly captures the contradictions of the movement.
And finally, think about the plantation workers in places like Assam. For them, Swaraj wasn't some grand political concept. It was something much more basic, much more human. They were trapped by a law that meant they couldn't leave the tea gardens without permission. For them, freedom was simply the right to go home, to get back to their villages.
So you've got all these different dreams, all these separate struggles, all bubbling up under this one banner of Swaraj. And this massive popular explosion of protest, well, it provoked an equally massive and brutal response from the British.
The government basically hit the panic button. They rushed through this thing called the Rowlatt Act, which was just unbelievably repressive. It gave them the power to arrest political activists and hold them in prison for up to 2 years without a trial. This was a direct attack on basic freedoms, and instead of calming things down, it just poured gasoline on the fire.
This contrast right here tells you everything. On one side, you see the power of the people filling the streets, and on the other, the government's response, armed soldiers patrolling a now empty street in Amritsar. The tension just kept building. Martial law was declared, and a man named General Dyer took command. And this leads us to one of the absolute darkest moments of this entire period, the Jallianwalla Bagh massacre. On April 13, 1919, General Dyer blocked the only exit to a crowded public garden and ordered his soldiers to open fire on thousands of unarmed men, women, and children. His goal, and these are his own chilling words, was to produce a moral effect, to create a feeling of terror and awe, to literally scare people into submission. The violence just kept spreading. At a place called Chori Chora, a peaceful demonstration turned violent, and an angry crowd attacked and burned down a police station. When Gandhi heard about this, he made a heartbreaking decision. He felt the movement was losing its soul, turning away from nonviolence. So in February 1922, he called the whole thing off.
So the movement was over, but that dream of Swaraj, that desire for freedom, it was now stronger than ever. The challenge was, what next? They had to find a new way forward, a new symbol that could finally, truly bring all these different parts of the nation together.
The next few years were a time of searching. Inside the Congress Party, there were huge arguments about what to do. At the same time, a global economic depression was hitting rural India really hard. The British response was to send an all-white commission, the Simon Commission, to decide India's future, which you can imagine did not go over well. All this frustration led younger leaders to push for a much clearer goal, not just self-rule, but Purna Swaraj, complete independence.
But that just brought them right back to the original problem, didn't it? An abstract idea, like complete independence, is one thing. But what single, tangible issue could rally everyone, from the poorest peasant to the richest industrialist? What could possibly unite all of those different dreams? The challenge was to find that one powerful symbol that could finally turn one nation's many dreams into a single unstoppable force.